Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coach Craig Sports. I know it's been a little bit of time since I made my last video. Been about a month, just focused on a couple of other different things right now. But we have another deeper dive into Dynasty series today. We're going to have a very special guest. I'm going to do a little bit of talking beforehand. So this deeper dive into Dynasty series, this one's going to be a little bit more question oriented focus as compared to like startup drafts or looking back at some rosters like we've done in the past. But without further ado, we have a special guest today, and that is Mr. TNF_Smokey on Twitter. And he is another member of the True North Fantasy Football team. And I'll let you take it away from here. Just tell the people a little bit about yourself.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on, Coach. It's always a pleasure to chop it up with you. You were one of the first guests on the relaunched Smoke Show, which is one of my podcasts. And yeah, it's good. It's a beautiful day here. I'm just kind of chilling inside, staying away from the heat, getting ready to talk some football. Mondays are my good days for recording, so I'm in the mood. I'm ready to just get in there. But myself. Like I said, I've got the Smoke Show podcast, which is primarily interview based. I like to provide perspectives from multiple people, as many as I can, on certain questions, and really give people more than one line of thinking to think about themselves and really open up their minds and use theirs. And then we've got the Jet Sweep Show, which is going to be coming back in about, what was the counter at? 40 days, 41 days now? Whatever the first Monday Night Football game is. So that's going to be me and my co-host, Will Harris, who you could find on Twitter at It's Harris Time, co-owner of Viridian Global, who is making these fly-ass shirts I am always wearing on these live streams and podcasts. Yeah, me and him, it's going to be every Monday Night Football. As soon as halftime starts, we start. As soon as halftime ends, we end. Boom, we get you in, we get you out, we get you the recap of the week, we get you some insight for the week ahead in fantasy, and we're well, you know, it's me and Will. We're going to make it fun. I remember my very first segment on the first season of the Jet Sweep, which was last year. I brought out my son Felix's Elmo doll, and I used him in an injury segment and pointed out, using him, all the injuries that happened that week that you had to be aware of, and you know, the fantasy implications for them. But that kind of set the tone for the rest of the life of the podcast so far. But yeah, I got that going on. Got a couple articles coming out, some collaboration ones with True North, some that I have to finish today. Don't kill me, Joe. But yeah, that's what I got going on content-wise.
I'll say don't undersell yourself either too. With the Smoke Show interviews, you got some big names on there, and it's really interesting, you know, just interviewing and really hearing the other side of these people. That you're doing a really interesting thing there. I know we haven't really seen too much of that in the industry. You know, obviously Dan Harris did a little bit of it last year as well. So
Game Changers, yeah, good
Both are very great podcasts, and just getting a little bit of different side to some of these big names too. But we'll get into it. And the first question that we do have is kind of just how you got into fantasy football and how long you kind of been playing fantasy football in general.
So I've done like, just picking wins, losses throughout the year, those kind of things for, many, many, many years, more than I can remember. But getting into actual fantasy football, I think it was about 2008 or 2009. I was bartending in Victoria, the capital of our province here in the west coast of Canada. And the owner had this league that he started up. I think it was just on ESPN. I want to say like an 8 or 10 team league. We did a live draft. It was the funnest thing I've ever experienced. And it was humbling in hindsight, because I learned that you're not to draft with your heart, and instead to draft with your head. I ended up with a lot of Cowboys on my, like, despite me wearing this George Kittle shirt today, for those who are watching the video, I am a diehard Cowboys fan, but I am also a diehard George Kittle fan. He's probably my favorite player in the NFL. And if you've ever seen this guy live in action, you know why. He's just electric on the field. But I digress. Diehard Cowboys fan. So I went pretty hard on them in that draft. And I mean, didn't turn out out so hot for me that year. I think I maybe finished bottom 4. I want to say something like that. I didn't make it playoffs. That's for damn sure. But yeah, I learned a lesson the hard way, and as a Cowboys fan, that's usually how we learn them. 14 years I've been playing fantasy football in some form.
Yeah, I like that point about the Cowboys too, because I think when I first started, I had a little too many Texans on my team. One point in time, my quarterback got hurt, and Sage Rosenfalls was starting for the Houston Texans, and he grew up, or he's originally from about a half hour from where I'm from. It's where like my mom grew up. So I'm like, we'll grab this guy, just put him in. And even going back to George Kittle, he's kind of got a little bit of a soft spot in my heart too. His wife's actually from the same high school that I went to as well.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. She's about 3 years younger though, but she played basketball at Iowa at the same time George Kittle was there playing football. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. I'll follow up with that too. Just so like once you played that first year, were you hooked like right away then? Or
Oh, absolutely. And the thing that it really changed me as a fan in general is prior to that, I would watch, as many games as I could a year, but there were only Cowboy games. Those are the only games I would watch. If it was another team playing, there'd be a feigning interest. It could be a background thing, but I just, I'm a Cowboys guy. I watch my boys. But from that point on, you had it made you invest into all these other teams because you had pieces everywhere. And since then I've kind of tried to divorce myself from those attachments on game day, because you want to just kind of be able to watch these games and enjoy them. But in the back of your head, you're going, okay, come on, I need 20 yards and a touchdown. But again, I digress. Yeah, it really changed me as a sports fan, because as I said, it made me invest into all these teams instead of just the Cowboys, and it made me become more of a fan of the sport. I started diving more into things. One thing that has been just a huge resource in that way, other than speaking with people like yourself and Ty, other True Northers and stuff, because man, it's it's a nice little brain trust in there that I definitely lean on. But Matt Harmon's reception perception, that thing has been so useful in bringing me up to speed, because I never played football myself. I'm from the west coast of Canada, man. I played hockey all the way up, 14 years, taught for another 10. Those are the kind of things I play. I played baseball for a while as well, until hockey became year round. And I always liked football. I was never built for football. I am exactly 122 at well, but 2 inches shorter. To put that in perspective, my legs are nicer than Devonta Smith. I will say that. I'll put that out there. But again, I'm not built for the game of football, but I'm a fan. But it made me, like I said, investing into everything, investing into the game. It changed me, and it made me a more knowledgeable fan. And in turn, it just started to, like, I have a voracious appetite for information. No matter what the passion is, I dive into it. And with football, it's the same way. So now I'm learning as much as I can from, like I said, from people like you and Ty and Matt Harmon, all these big guys that are producing content that really make it easy to digest and really propel yourself along the timeline of where you're at as a knowledgeable fan, as a content provider, if you choose to step into that space.
That's a good long-winded answer too. I think for myself, I kind of got hooked because like the first time I played, I was a freshman in high school. I got second place, so then it's like, okay, this is kind of fun. That's why I kind of asked, since you didn't have quite as much success like right away, is that because that could deter some people. Maybe you get away from it for a couple of years, then come back to it.
Oh no, competitive.
Yeah.
Want it. If you saw how many leagues I'm in now, that would definitely kind of back up that statement.
From that point on, how long have you kind of been playing Dynasty, and how did you kind of transition over there and get started into that?
See, the thing with me is when I'm looking to get into something new, I'm not going to jump into it right away. So I only started playing Dynasty last offseason, but the offseason before that is when I really dove into Dynasty, researching it as much as I can, different strategies, different angles, ways you can play it. successful ways, not so successful ways, just learning as much as I could about it before I actually put that into practice myself. And so last offseason, when I also became a kind of an analyst, content provider, whatever you want to call me, I dove in hard. The first Dynasty league I jumped into was one they call a multiverse league, and this is two mirror leagues, two sister leagues, we will say, of the same 12 players in each side, and it's 4 drafts in the startup, 2 vet drafts, 2 rookie drafts. But the thing is, you can use players from either league or either universe as trade commodities going back and forth, provided those players stay in their universe. And so, like, it was like just explaining that and trying to say that out loud sounds confusing as hell. And so, for a person to dive into this kind of league for their first Dynasty league was crazy. But the thing that drew me to it was the strategy. I love strategy. I should say strategies, whatever you want to call it. There's so many different approaches you can take, and especially in a league like that. Oh man! And I was co-commissioning it. I ended up taking a bit of the workload on that one, but like I had spreadsheets going. It was beautiful. The trades were crazy. One trade that ended up making was with my guy Brett Pape, and he really wanted Tua. I know that's going to be a bit of a divisive subject here. And I also love Tua. As you know, he was my pre-draft QB1 last year. And I knew he wanted him. And he was falling in this multiverse rookie draft. And I had soaked up quite a bit of capital. So I already made 2 picks in the top 6. And I had the 111 as well. And so Tua had fallen. He was there at the 111, and Brett really wanted him. He's like, okay, I will trade you both of my firsts for next year. So the first for this league and the first for this league next year for this 111 this year. That's it. Straight up, straight across. I'm like, you can't pass up on value like that, man. I'd be a fool. Yeah. So of course, I let him. I acquiesce. The trade is made. He gets his boy in Tua. I end up getting Tua in the other side, and then kind of a funny aside to this. Partway through the season, we ended up making a Tua for Tua trade. So basically, in the one league, I trade Tua for nothing, and in the other league, he trades nothing for Tua, and we just trade spots on there. So I ended up getting Tua in that league, anyways, where I gave up the 111, but I ended up getting both his first for next year. And by chance, where do you think he finished last year in both leagues? Dead last. Dead last in both. I love you, Brett. I'm sorry to bring it up like this. I probably should have used a fake name. His name's like Rhett Escape. But I ended up getting the 101 in both of the rookie drafts this year. My team, to bring this kind of full circle, my strategy for this one, I kind of took some values where they fell to me, but I did have a bit of a preconceived strategy for this one. Now, for both these, I ended up taking receivers that were second year primarily, and then the backs that were kind of proven at that point. So, for example, in the one side this year, after I didn't finish very high because I was planning basically building a roster for a win in year 2, 3, 4, and 5, like setting up a proper dynasty here. But, kind of accepting the fact that unless all these upsides are hitting year 1, which the likelihood is just like near 0, this team's not going to be super competitive or anything like that. And that's okay. But I'm going to see, if these players that I'm taking the shots on in their year 2 seasons are going to be worth it. And so I ended up finishing 3rd last in the one and 4th last in the other. So I had the 101 and the 103, and then I had the 101 and the 104 in the 2 rookie drafts this year. And, good year to have top picks in the rookie drafts. So to bring it all around, after one season of playing Dynasty in this one, my starting roster for the one side of the multiverse This is a super flex as well. So I've got Matt Stafford and Trevor Lawrence as my starting quarterbacks. I've got DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins as my starting running backs. Terry McLaurin, C.D. Lamb, Jamar Chase as my starting wide receivers. I got Kittle at tight end. And in the flex currently, I've got Dallas Goedert and Antonio Brown. So through making some acquisitions, taking values on guys like Antonio Brown last year, which, he was going precipitously late, with the goal of 2021 in mind, with 2022 in mind, I knew I wasn't going to be competing with this roster, and that's fine. And so we get to the other one, and the other side of the multiverse, where I also got Trevor Lawrence. So in that one, it's a little bit more of a proven team. I think this one is probably going to compete a bit more with less upside dependence on rookies, we'll say. But for this one, I've got Trevor Lawrence and Teddy Bridgewater as my starting QB. So not the greatest. I'm probably going to have to make some moves for a more solid quarterback unless we see out of camp that Teddy has taken it, which I have full belief he will. Come on, Drew Lock. He's not a starting quarterback. Get out of here. But I digress. Starting running backs, I got Saquon Barkley and Zeke, which I think is a pretty potent 1-2 combo right there. I know Saquon's going to be probably limited in the first 4 to 5 weeks, but he's still Saquon Barkley, man. He can snap these plays off. I believe in the talent. You buy the injury dip, which I did with him. I got him for a pretty good steal from what I remember. And then for starting wide receivers on that team, I got Devontae Adams, Terry McLaurin, Julio Jones, and in tight end slot, I've got Kyle Pitts. And flex, I got Dallas Goedert and C.D. Lamb. So there's some youth for sure, but there's also some pretty proven top end pieces there that I've made through desperation trades through the end of the year there to people who, I think I traded Derek Carr for Julio Jones or something like that at the trade deadline for a guy who really needed Derek Carr. And I still believe in Julio Jones. Yeah, he's still got some value. And him being traded to the Titans, I like that move for him. So I think he gets some good value out of that still. But I'm saying it's going to take some work if you're going to build a dynasty roster that way. That's kind of a long-winded way of saying that. But if you have that future, that foresight in mind, yeah, a lot of these guys ended up hitting for me. It was a good rookie class to have all those kind of dart throws on, we'll say, even though they were kind of higher probability dart throws. It was a good year to do that for that example. But when I go into a dynasty startup, do I have that draft strategy in mind? No, I don't have a certain draft strategy in mind. You have to react to what the board is giving you, depending on where your roster or where your draft slot is, whether there's a third round reversal or anything crazy like that. There's all these different things, whether you're a very active trader in a draft. These can all make differences as to where some of these players are going to fall to you. Crazy scoring settings. Like, I am a fantasy degenerate. So I look for these leagues that have just like the craziest scoring settings now. Like, I'm in a couple best balls that have like 10 points per reception for tight ends. It's insane. The first round was just like 8 tight ends, Christian McCaffrey and Mahomes, and then like a couple others, but like it's crazy. But like it stretches your brain because you go, okay, well, where's the value in these ones? Which players like, and like sometimes the starting roster is like 2 wide receivers, 8 super flex, and a kicker. It's like, okay, so quarterbacks across the board, but then there's like you can like you were statting out the other day what a 40+ yard touchdown by a running back would be in that league. It was like 18 to 22 points or something for like one play. So it's like, okay, so do you go for the McCaffreys? Do you go for the Ecklers? Like, and with these bonuses, like it's crazy, but you have to know going into a startup, you have to know the scoring settings. You have to know what size the league is, because that makes a big difference is where you're going to be taking certain position groups. Like for instance, in the 32 team league I'm in, which is just crazy. Obviously you want to go for a quarterback because actually in that league, there's no actual quarterback start or position in the starting slots. It's just a super flex. So, obviously you want a quarterback. I learned last year in that one not to roll the dice with Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky. But that is neither here nor there. But no. And I like, oh, how could you not? I went with him. I have Kelsey and Scott Fishbowl because I had the 103. I said before then that that was me kind of not being water, but kind of being water because I'm only 3 picks into the draft. I know it's going to be one of 3 people landing to me. And I said, Kelsey falls to me. I'm looking nowhere else. I'm taking him no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And he fell to me. So I built my roster around that. That was me kind of hedging my bets. But after that, you be water. You take those values. You take the people that make the most sense there. But yeah, I would definitely say my rosters this year are slanting towards the elite tight end. One in particular has shot up to the top of my rostership percentages, and I'm in the double digits, and I think probably up into 60% across my dynasty rosters now. But that would be Mr. Kyle Pitts, Gator.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you kind of talk about the elite tight ends and kind of what we really seen, like the change in that too, the difference between the guys that are really at the top and kind of later. And I think even for me, as a guy who's never really drafted tight end early, it's like something you kind of have to change your thinking about. And I know, was it Jamie Eisenberg? He said, I think it was on the Fantasy Pros when he was drafting with those guys, it's great or late nowadays. So you either get one of the top 3 or you kind of just wait around. I think there's some guys in the middle, but that middle class of tight ends for like the last 10 years, there's a lot of bust rate in that group.
Well,
it seems like all those. Yeah. And I think even that group's kind of getting pushed up a little bit more nowadays too, where some of those guys are up closer to the 4th or 5th round instead of round 6 through 8. And that, just like the rate that those guys don't hit on it, makes it a little bit more concerning. And I think in Dynasty, especially, you can, if you don't get one of those elite guys, you might as well just wait, because we see guys come out every year. Last year, it was Logan Thomas and Robert Tonyan that were waiver wire ads last year. Like, you could just pick them up. I picked up Logan Thomas last year, like during the season, just because he was getting a little bit camp hype. I'm like, well, he's the 25th guy on the roster. If he does anything, he's worth it. I flipped him, and I think I flipped him and Travis Etienne for DJ Moore in a 3rd round pick. So like,
damn.
But
from a waiver wire pick, that's beautiful.
But there's so many just different ways to address Dynasty. Personally, myself, in like startup drafts, I'm somebody that tries to trade back as far as I can and get and acquire as many future assets as possible. Is that something like you try to do or not?
I understand the movement behind it and everything, and I know some people that are just die hard about like, oh, you get this guy right now, you pick him up for the waiver, you sit on him for 2 months, and then you flip him for a 3rd, blah blah blah. Man, I'm in 24 leagues. You think I have the wherewithal to do this? Putting out 2 podcasts, putting out a little bit of content here and there, being a father of a toddler, trying to have my marriage, working a full-time job that ain't this. I mean, that's a lot of involvement to do that. I mean, if the value's there and people approach me on it, I've always got a willing and open ear, and I've been known to go back and forth, like 13, 14 rounds in trade negotiations to make it work. And I'm okay with that. But I'm probably not going to be the person going out there and, putting that time in to initiate these trades. But man, send them my way and I'm good.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of the same way too. I don't go looking for a whole bunch of trades, but if somebody's willing to talk about it. But I think too often in Dynasty, you see guys that they just send these random trade offers out. There's one guy in one of my leagues, and it's like, you just look at it and you're like, why did you even send this? Like, and like, I'm somebody, I'd rather try to talk and say, hey, I'm kind of interested in this guy. Like, I want to talk instead of sending counter offers back and forth. The series that we're going to have coming out on the True North website, the how-to series, I talk a lot about trading in my trade article too. And that's something I mentioned too, is how big communication is, because you can go a lot farther. Like, say you and I are talking for 20 minutes, we could probably get a trade worked out instead of sending counter offers back and forth for 3 days.
Yes, there's no context. There's no little message window saying, hey, I want to get this guy off you. What is it going to take? What position group are you in need of? I think you have a need here, but I don't really want to telegraph that because, well, I'm trying to beat your ass in this. But Yeah, there's no room for that. And having a simple dialogue, yeah, that would get a trade done way quicker. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is everybody, everybody wants to win every trade too.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to my history, like I was involved with like trading card games, playing competitively and trading and stuff like that. And everybody wants to win every transaction, every trade. Everybody's trying to nickel and dime everything. So uh, it's kind of the same way when you think about this too. And you want to get that max value on your player when you can too. So there's just a lot that goes into that, I would say. Probably the next question I have, though, and kind of talking about some of your teams, they seem pretty youthful. So I'm just going to go into it. And how much do you kind of value youth overall in Dynasty? And I think this is an important question overall, just because I feel like youth is important, but I feel like where we're at right now, especially like in the fantasy football Twitter community and those type of leagues, that maybe youth is a little bit too overvalued.
Absolutely. My leading point was going to be that I do value youth to an extent, but I value talent. The reason a lot of those rosters that I was talking about there are young is because those guys have talent, but they're young. I did have a bit of a focus, like I said, on sophomore receivers and everything like that last year with the construction of those two teams, knowing that, wide receivers have a longer life. I'm probably going to get some good max years out of these guys. I'm going to build around that, just drafting young running backs every year, replenishing that position, trading when I can some excess assets. Excess asset. There we go. For quarterback play, whatever I need. I know I'm going to have those elite tight ends. I'm not worried about that. So it's really just knowing how this build is going to go further along and everything. But am I gonna use youth as a tiebreaker? Sometimes, but I'm not going to use it as a rule or an exception. I'm going to look at every situation with context, because you can't really have like a blanket rule across that. Yeah, look at these guys, like guys like Terry McLaurin. Yeah, I was in on that talent. Has he had bum ass quarterback play? Absolutely. But he's produced on it, like the same kind of way that Allen Robinson is produced with bum ass quarterback play. But now, I'm not saying that Terry got a supreme upgrade at quarterback, but he got himself a gunslinger that loves to lock onto the top target. And guess who that top target is? That'd be Mr. Terry Dan McLaurin. And I think he's going to feast because of that, as long as, Fitzpatrick remains behind center. But that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, guys like that, I bought in on the talent. The fact that he's not super young. Terry McLaurin came out a little bit older, but guys like that, where the talent is there, that no matter what their situation is, they've dealt with crap situations. If I see diamonds coming out of piles of shit, I'm gonna dust those off. I'm gonna give them a good little antiseptic spray, shine them up a little bit, and they're gonna put a nice little starting spot on my roster, because you know what? Their situation can do nothing but improve. And if they're still putting up those numbers while it's a crap situation, and I shine them up and they get a little improvement somewhere in the offensive scheme, boom, awesome. That means I've hit even further. I mean, hopefully, you would assume. But yeah, but I don't use it as a differentiator. Like, I had a lot of Mark Ingram last year. It worked out all right for, a couple weeks. But I didn't. The point for that specific example is I didn't shy away from him because of his age. I know that he was a proven producer, everything like that. It's not like I was spending high draft capital on him, but he was probably a 7th, 8th round pick last year, something like that. So yeah, you're not, you go into that knowing that the timeline is limited. Use him for what you need him for, replace him with youth. But yeah, it's the youth isn't the be all to end all. I'd rather have proven production, which is why I'm okay trading for a guy like Julio. I love Julio. He can still put up numbers, man. Like, this Julio damn Jones here. Are we kidding ourselves thinking that this guy is just dust now? He's not AJ Green, who, while we're on the subject, apparently is look glowing in camp, but 7-on-7, take that for what it is.
Yep. That's, like I said, it's kind of an important one though, but like kind of what you said, you can use you sometimes to differentiate if it's really that last minute tiebreaker. You know, maybe you go with the guy that's 24 instead of the guy that's 27. But feel like some people are stuck on those numbers so much. Like, oh, you can't draft Adam Thielen because he's going to be 31 this year. Well, if Adam Thielen's going in the 9th round, you can draft Adam Thielen.
Yeah.
This is one that I'm not like super big on this guy, but in one of the startup drafts that I did this offseason, Emmanuel Sanders, it was like round 22 and nobody's touching him. I'm like, I'll take him because if he does anything with the Bills, you can turn it, like, at worst, you'd flip him for a third. Like,
absolutely. And it's free. He's free. Yeah. Who are you going to be taking there anyways? Like the tight end 4 in Cleveland? Like just grab him, man. Like we've seen this guy produce before. He has that in his range of outcomes. And you know, everyone around him's just kind of dropping like flies. So maybe we'll see the resurgence of Manny a little bit. But yeah, that's a smart dart throw. Smart darts, man.
Yeah. I think that's part of the biggest thing too for Dynasty is just knowing like when you get in those later rounds, go get the guys that you want first of all, and then like if it's getting later and there's there's a Emmanuel Sanders there, if there's a Marvin Jones there, Marvin Jones is free in Dynasty. Like,
I love Marvin Jones. He's one of I think he's in my top 15 rostered players still from last year.
The dude just produces, and like being that 5th round talent that he was at one point in time too. And I think he's going to have a great year this year with Trevor Lawrence because that's the type of wide receiver he wants to throw to. That's the type of wide receiver he had in college at Clemson. I know people, it's like, this is me going off on a rant, but I know people want DJ Chark to be that guy. It's not going to be DJ Chark, but they brought Marvin Jones in for a reason.
Jones. I mean, that in itself should be telling. The regime went out and got Jones.
Yep, and he's got the connection with Bevel and everything too. So I think he's definitely a guy to have in redraft. Like redraft, he's free. Dynasty is free. I think I talked about it with Jim and Connor. I'm like, he's just free. Like, why wouldn't you want that guy?
Right? If you told me a penny I could pick up off the street that cost me nothing could actually be worth like $50, yeah, I'm going to pick up that penny and hold on to it for a little bit. It's not hurting my pocket. It's not hurting at the bottom of my roster. But you know what? If it appreciates in value and I can flip it, boom, I've come out ahead.
Yep. The next question is kind of like, do you have any tips for people that are either new, like brand new to Dynasty, newer to Dynasty? Maybe you could talk about some of the things that you've learned. I know myself, even like when I first started in Dynasty, you always make that one trade that looks terrible in hindsight. For me, it was that 3-sport league I was telling you about earlier. I traded like my 1st round pick in the NFL draft for Andre Johnson, who was probably like the 3rd last year of his career. At that point, I was a huge Texans fan. Andre Johnson's my favorite player of all time. So looking back, it was not a good trade, but because I probably could have, and it was a contract league too. So his salary is still like $15 million or something at the time. So really not the best trade, in hindsight, but being a first Dynasty league and all that too. I think we all kind of make one of those trades at some point in time.
Absolutely. And I think that's the first point we need to bring up in this tips for new people here is after you've spent all this time, if you're approaching a draft like I did, and I'm not expecting you to spend a year abstaining from joining Dynasty while you've researched methods. But if you are coming into this fairly well researched or researched in any capacity, you've done everything for a reason. Let your draft sit for a bit. Fall in love with your roster. I know it's going to be so appeasing when you first stop, and then it's going to be like, oh, how can I keep this high going? Let's get some trades going. Guess what? The team that you drafted is the team that you researched, that you hopefully have pulled off successfully what you plan to do with this draft. Be happy with that for a bit. Just sit on them for a while. Appreciate them for what they are. Take stock of what your roster is, where the deficiencies are, where you are loaded at. And then after that point, start looking into trades and stuff like that, if that's the route you were so looking to take. But don't just jump in there because you have to hit that fix, man.
That's a great point. That's kind of like something I always talk about too. Don't trade just to trade for the, my roommate, we played fantasy football in since college together, and he's one of those guys. His team's off to a rough start for 3 weeks, and he just trades because he thinks it's gonna like instant Band-Aid fix it, or sometimes he just gets bored. Like we play fantasy baseball together too, and he'd like trade just to trade like half the time. And like something I always talk about, and I think it's in that article too that's coming out when I talk about trades, is trading should be when you have a need. And in Dynasty, you're probably gonna have to trade a little bit more for needs. In regular redraft, a lot of times you can pick up your need off the waiver wire. So what I talked about in the article is just more geared towards redraft. So if you have a position of need that you need to fill a spot for and you can't get it on waiver wire, that's when I try to look to trade in general. And then from there, you always want to trade from like an area of surplus for an area of need as well. And then like another thing, especially in Dynasty, don't be afraid to like really trade for the guys that you do like, but don't be the guy that's like your Tua trade, maybe that trading 2 first-round picks for the 111, essentially. That might have been a little bit too much in hindsight.
Scenario, really.
Yeah. But maybe even this year, don't be the guy that trades 4 first-round picks for Kyle Pitts.
Yes. Yes. See, I came by all my pitch shares quite naturally. Thank you. I never had to trade up for them. I took them as they fell to me. It just so happens that we were destined to be together from the moment the two of us were set upon this earth. Our paths have been intertwined till we get to I can go on forever. Anyways, I love Pitts. But while we're on the trade subject, tip number 2 is try to come with an even trade. Don't just try to juice a guy, because you're gonna sour the mood of trade negotiations between you and him. There's a chance that they're laughing behind your back with some of the other guys in your league, going, "Look at this fucking douche pickle trade offer." That's a trademark of True North Fantasy Football right there. And that could be just really turning your prospects negative for any future negotiations with these other league mates. So try to come with a fair offer. Ideally, you want to be getting the best player out of any trade. So if you're coming to negotiations faithfully and you're doing an even trade in your mind, you're going to have a lot more success with it. Also, not everyone is going to be an ideal trade partner for the trade you are trying to achieve. So you need to be really digging in. As much as you've taken stock of your own roster and its efficiencies and deficiencies, you need to be doing the same with the potential trade partners. What do they need? Is that something that you have a surplus of? Fantastic. Do they have that player you need? Fantastic. Can they afford to get rid of him? Even better. Makes the negotiations a little bit easier. But you know what? Even if they can't afford to get rid of him, you can make them an offer and really work this out. So don't just blindly sauce out 100 million trade offers, because it's going to be like reject. They're not even going to take the time to counter. So if you want to have a good negotiation, really understand your trade partner and their needs. And that's good life advice, kids, for relationships too. All right. You can double that one down. But a third tip, like we touched on earlier, you don't always have to go for youth. If you're in it to win it year one, go for that proven production. Go for that Julio. Go for that Thielen. Go for the players like that, because you're going to get them at a value. So you can really focus on those other upper echelon or top tier players elsewhere in the draft in the initial rounds.
Mm-hmm. And I think even kind of going back to the trade thing too, something that I've seen personally, trade calculators are great, but they're not the end all be all either. You see, I have one guy in my league. He kept trying to trade for Kareem Hunt and J.K. Dobbins, and he tried to justify it. Well, the trade calculator says it's an even trade. Well, you're giving me a first-round pick like N'Keal Harry and like Damian Harris for like this was the middle of last season. I'm like, just because your trade calculator that you're using says it, like, just be careful. I would not pay for a trade calculator personally, but if that's the choice you guys want to make, that's fine too. We're both on Twitter. If you ever want to run a trade by us, definitely more than happy.
I just want to jump in here for a second. While we're on the subject of trade calculators, I have not used those. I don't use them. if that's what you're coming in with, you're just following an algorithm that is built around different data points and everything like that is fed into it, that doesn't know the context of your league. It speaks into the advice point number 2 in this section here, which is knowing your trade partner and really gauging what their valuation of a player is, because it's not going to be the same as that trade calculator algorithm. I can almost guarantee you that. So you really have to, and that's where negotiations can really go back and forth, and you can really hone in and see exactly where they value a player. Because then once you figure that out, oh man, you read people, it makes negotiations so easy, and you just walk away like a damn champ every time. Mostly every time.
And like, that's something that I always preach, is knowing your league, knowing the people in your league, especially if you know them real well. Like, for example, like in the True North Dynasty League that we're in, I'm not a big fan of Kyle Trask, but like where he landed in our rookie draft, I took him. I'm like, well, I'll have one share just in case, but I know Jim loves him, so I could probably turn around and trade him, to him a couple months down the road too. And especially, you can snipe people that way and stuff too. It's knowing where you do have some leverage and just with the people that you're around even. But and I think that's probably more valuable in Dynasty too, because when you're playing in Dynasty, the goal is for these leagues to last, 5+ years. So ideally you have the same owners there. I know it doesn't always happen. You always have kind of that 1 or 2 teams that will kind of disband in it once their team kind of goes to crap, or they make some bad trades, stuff like that too. And I'll say, even, if you're in a Dynasty league, if your team goes to crap, don't be that person either too. Cause you can spend some time, do some research, rebuild your team, get some draft picks.
That's the fun, man. Starting from crap. I mean, that gives you the chance to, like, you ever play that old Tetris mode where like you already start off with a bunch of oddly placed bricks all throughout the level? That's what a crap Dynasty team is like playing. You got to figure out how to get around these little obstacles that are all over your roster, landmined everywhere. If you can wipe those out and start with a more clean slate, boom. That is so much more fun. I mean, winning is also fun, but you know what? It's kind of cool building a team as well.
Yeah. And honestly, that's something that I kind of like to do too. But I'm somebody that's big into prospects. Probably goes back to my history, with fantasy baseball, playing Dynasty baseball, just because I've taken over teams where it's just crap, and I go and trade for all these minor league guys. Cause like, going back the last probably 3 years or so, I pretty much watch film on every guy that got drafted in the amateur draft for baseball, just looking at their swings, looking at their, for me, it's like, okay, this guy's a shortstop now. Can he play shortstop in the future? Okay, his arm's not that good. His footwork's not that good. You can look at guys' swings, especially, like, I know this is about football, but baseball, you can see how quick their hands are. You can see if there's a big loop in their swing. You can look at past production, especially for college players. Do they draw a lot of walks? Do they hit for power? Do they strike out too much? Because there's a lot of tell signs that they can do this or that. Pitching's even more, because you can just look at guys' mechanics and you can tell if they're going to have future arm problems. NFL, you can kind of see some of that stuff out in college too, and that's part of what I like to look at. But it's more about things that translate well to the NFL level and kind of their landing spots as well too. But with that being said, in Dynasty, you don't want to overreact too much to landing spots. We've seen it with AJ Brown. We've seen
Rashad Bateman.
Well,
wow, what do you think about that one? I knew you'd get you on that one.
I am not the biggest Rashad Bateman fan myself. I think he'll be like, he's a decent number 2 wide receiver for an NFL team. That's what I think he's going to be. I think everybody kind of wants him to be this Allen Robinson type, but I don't think he's ever going to get that type of volume. I think what he's going to do is going to be good for the Ravens, better from an NFL's perspective. I don't think he's ever going to be the alpha 1 type wide receiver. I'm pretty big on Tyler Wallace. I've gone on a podcast, Rookie on the Rise podcast. Shout out to Britt Sanders over there. We talked about Tyler Wallace and a whole bunch of other stuff on that podcast too. But he could be that alpha type. I think he's a guy that would fit well with Lamar Jackson just because he's great at those contested catches, the jump balls, because Lamar's not that accurate passer. He's used to playing with guys who aren't the most accurate passer at Oklahoma State and going up and getting the ball no matter where it went, even though he's, 6 feet tall. But, and that's part of the thing, like Dynasty, especially with these prospects, you get to see so many different prospects. You can pick the guys that you like. So maybe maybe I'm really high on Tylan Wallace because I love the way he attacks the ball in the air. You watch Rashad Bateman, he lets the ball come to him. So some people might value one thing, Rashad Bateman's more of a route runner. So some people value route running a ton. I think there's good and bad to that. We see Jerry Jeudy. Yeah, he can get open. Yeah, he had a whole bunch of drops last year. We can get into that whole argument with Drew Lock and everything too. But I wasn't the highest on Jerry Jeudy coming out of college either way. But Devonta Smith was the best wide receiver at Alabama. I've been on the record as saying that out of all the 4 wide receivers that were there, he's the best. But that's a whole nother, there's so many different things we could get down on someday, even going back to like your Terry McLaurin, your Allen Robinson there. I think Terry McLaurin, he'll have a really good year. Is it because of Ryan Fitzpatrick? Maybe it helps him out some, but guy played with 2 high ankle sprains last year too. He's going to get better because of that. AJ Brown's going to play better this year because he didn't have 2 bum knees. So there's extra factors, and it's not always the factors that people preach, especially if you're following some of these people on Twitter, because you got to know who to follow, because some people are just looking for clicks. That's all it is.
Right.
Follow some good people. I mean, especially if you're in analytics, follow Ty, because he is the king of analytics. I am not a super analytic person. I'm still digging into that. I'm more of a let me see it type of thing. Even if you go back to Cam Akers this year, everybody's freaking out against that game against Seattle that he had 100 and whatever yards in the playoffs, on 29 carries. If you watch the game, Cam Akers did not do anything special in that game. He got exactly what was blocked for him. But you're freaking out like he's the best thing since sliced bread. And the Rams offensive line overproduced last year. They played way above their skill, especially for the time that Whitworth was out, for like 5 weeks or so. So there's some regression that was going to come back into that. But obviously Cam Akers got hurt. I wasn't the biggest fan out of him out of college. I have a personal reference from Florida State that, wasn't the biggest fan of him coming out of college either. So nothing, you don't wish injury upon anyone, but where he was going was just a little bit too high regardless. Darrell Henderson, somebody I do love. He's super fun to watch. Like once he gets going, man, it's like a bowling ball rolling downhill. I could go on about so many of these things for too long. Let's see. I'll ask you one thing though. And later on in rookie drafts this year and kind of later on in startup drafts, who are like this offseason, who are guys that you've been kind of maybe get attaching yourself more to, I guess is probably the right way to say it.
Oh, and Dynasty, definitely Darnell Mooney. I mean, I've got a lot of shares existing from last year because I was really in on him post-draft. But this one is really a looking towards the future, not exactly 2021 outlook thing, because, I don't trust when Nagy's going to actually do the right decision and get Fields in there. If it was week 1, fantastic. My opinion of him goes up for 2021. But the fact that Fields can get a competent deep ball to Mooney, who I think is just going to be a home run when it comes to a deep ball threat. And like all those prayer yards from last year, which were in the 700s, I believe, those are going to turn into actual yards this time if it's Fields back there chucking them. I have heard Dalton's actually been throwing some deep ball out there. I don't have high hopes.
Yay.
But it is what it is. But he's a guy I'm definitely grabbing late because with the uncertainty and everything there, people are still letting him slide. I think people are still in that prove it to me mode. I think I've seen the glimpses that I need to, that this guy could be a fantasy producer, like big play type ability, where he wouldn't necessarily need the huge volume because he could snap off those big plays. And Yeah, so he's kind of a guy in vet drafts, we'll say, that I'm getting late. Gerald Everett too. I've been getting him as much as I can late because, in my opinion, that guy's going to be the third option in the Seattle passing attack. And for Russell Wilson, I'll take that because that might mean some very valuable red zone work. That dude's efficient as hell when it comes to that. So I will attach that because he costs nothing. You can get him so late, man. He's just an afterthought. And when you're doing the greater late strategy with tight end, that's one of my late guys. Even though I've already gotten the great, I'm hitting the late as well for my tight end 3, we'll say. And that's a guy I'm looking at. Rookie wise, I mean, he's ascending more and more. But if you can get him in the back end of the or somewhere that is palatable, Rondale Moore, man, I think this kid is going to be something special. I mean, he is something special, but I think he's going to work himself into that old Larry Fitzgerald role there. And I'm not a huge Cardinals fan or anything like that, but in my books, DeAndre Hopkins, if he doesn't retire because of vaccination stances, that's a whole other kettle of fish. He plays a full season. With Kyler playing a full season, he's my wide receiver 1 for 2021. I think Hopkins is going to absolutely freaking smash this year. But there's going to be more around. They run a ton of plays. They like to spread that offense around. So if he can solidify that slot role, push out a guy like Kirk, make him irrelevant out of that role, limit him more to the outside of the Z or whatever they want to use him for. I think Rondale Moore could be great, but as I said, he's kind of rising up and up. So see some other guys. I mean, he's fallen, or he's rising, I should say, to Michael Carter. I think he's got a great opportunity there. Ambiguous backfield.
That's my dude.
really glowing camp reports right now, and I think he could be a low key bright spot on the Jets offense this year.
What I like most about Michael Carter too is, everybody's like, oh, he's only a 4th round draft capital. That's all you ever hear about the guy, right? The dude was talented in college. If you love Javonte Williams, you probably should love Michael Carter because he was better at North Carolina besides pass protection. That's the only real thing that he wasn't better at. But, he's one of those guys, you watch him play, he's excellent at setting up defenders. Like, he'll make you think you're going one way and he just goes the other way. He's decently elusive, but, he's not the fastest guy in the world. He's not the biggest guy in the world. That's all these knocks on him, but he knows how to play football at the end of the day. And one thing that I thought that was funny, and I always kind of brought it up as a stat going on the draft, everybody thinks Kenny Gainwell is so young. He's older than Michael Carter. And Kenny Gainwell was a redshirt sophomore, and Michael Carter was a 4-year senior.
Yeah.
You look at next year's running back class, it's not really anything special, so I don't think he's going to get replaced right away next year as long as he does something. There could be some free agents and stuff, but I don't think they're going to invest too heavily in the running back position. Nobody really does anymore.
No need to.
There's running backs I like in next year's class, but next year's draft in general, running backs, quarterbacks, there's a lot of guys you just want to see that next step from. So 2022 picks, they could be kind of good if you can get them for cheap. 2023 is kind of where the money is at. If you pretty much ask anybody that's been involved in Devy, but there's a lot of interesting players. I think quarterback in 2022 could be interesting. Running back, there's, the top 2 guys, Breece Hall, Isaiah Spiller. Then, there's everybody else kind of competing for that 3rd spot. But the wide receiver class, just stay away from wide receivers in 2022. Like, Garrett Wilson could be really good. Chris Olave is just like, he's like bad Jerry Jeudy. Like, he's a route runner, but that's it. And like, I don't know. He's not that, like, if you're really concerned about Devonta Smith's size, he's like pretty much the same size. He got a couple more pounds on him, but they're about the same guy. Trayvon Burks, big wide receiver at Arkansas, but pretty much only played out of the slot. We'll see what he does out wide this year with Mike Woods gone, going over to Oklahoma now. Just so many things. Like Justin Ross, coming back off the back surgery. Is he going to be all right at Clemson this year? Is he going to be able to play even? I think he's medically cleared now. George Pickens coming off ACL. just not really the group of wide receivers you want to get too attached to. I mean, David Bell out of Purdue is somebody that's probably going to slide, but we'll see how he does this year. But he could be a guy to look for. But not really that top end wide receiver talent that we see in the last couple of years coming out. That's kind of that. Tight ends could be interesting again next year, though. Not Kyle Pitts interesting, but decent class interesting.
Well, who is really?
Yeah, Vernon Davis.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, well, I hope Kyle Pitts works out, just because if he doesn't, the world might burn. But
hey,
I
got the matches, baby.
we seen athletic guys go in the first round and not turn out too. Whether it's your Eric Ebron, your OJ Howard, and rookie tight ends, they typically don't do much their first year, but it's like they have to throw the ball to somebody at this point.
That's the thing. What rookie tight ends coming out are going to be used as the number 2 in a pass-friendly offense on a team with a crap defense? I mean, there's so many things that are working in his favor here. I'm not saying he's going to break Dicka's record or anything like that, but I'm saying he's going to have a good season. And the reason I have so many shares, because the majority of them are in Dynasty, is the fact that this is long-term thinking, folks. We're talking deeper dive into Dynasty. Think deeper. Look down the road, man. Some of these leagues that you're in might be transitioning to tight end premium because there's just going to be a plethora of wicked guys coming in and everything like that. So think ahead. If that's an eventuality, plan for that. Get a guy like Kyle Pitts, man. What is it costing you? A guy that might not hit anyways in your rookie draft at that point? Just get him, damn it. I mean, most of you are already done your dynasty drafts and everything, but go get Kyle Pitts. Because he will never be cheaper. Never. I don't care if he has what people think are a subpar season. You're not going to get him cheaper than you will drafting him. So just draft him if you want him.
There's a little rant. But I think that's a pretty good wrap on everything. I think we covered a lot of different things, a lot of the main questions. Got a couple little tangents in there, but I'll even go back to your Darnell Mooney. I think Justin Fields starting helps him a lot more than it does help Allen Robinson. I think people are a little overreacting a little bit too much to Allen Robinson just because it's like, oh, he hasn't never had a good quarterback to play with. Well, first of all, you're assuming Justin Fields is going to be a good quarterback at the NFL level. We haven't seen it yet. Obviously, he's a rookie. We can't say that for any rookie at this point in time. Even Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Mac Jones, whoever you want to say. But if he's played with all these bad quarterbacks that latched onto him and just fed him targets, what if Justin Fields doesn't do that? What if he spreads the ball around? Then is Allen Robinson really that much better than he's been? And I've seen so many people being like, Allen Robinson is a top 5 wide receiver now. Well, we kind of got to see it. And like, if he's not getting the 150 targets or whatever he's been getting, if he doesn't get that, I don't care. Like, and he's not that big touchdown scorer either. So, and maybe it works out because, Justin Fields, he kind of liked to lock on to number 1 at Ohio State. Part of it was their offense and just how it worked out. And then if it wasn't there, he kind of took off and run. I'm not going to dive too deep into that because I think for as athletically gifted as Justin Fields is, he's not a great awareness in the pocket and knowing when to run and kind of picking his spots, and not the best vision as a runner. I'll say that at least. Trey Lance, though, I love his vision as a runner. He could be a running back, but maybe if he doesn't work out at quarterback, but we'll see.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a little too much going off on my tangent, though. You gotta stop me sometimes if I do that, though. But
that's all right. You were bound to have one in this matchup with mine.
Yeah. All we gotta say is fire Matt Nagy. So yeah. I mean, Daz Newsom's another guy I love, but until Matt Nagy gets fired, he ain't going. Like, because Anthony Miller only played 40% of the snaps out of the slot last year. They put Jimmy Graham out there in 3 wide receiver sets as a wide receiver, and Kmet played in the slot some too, but he's more inline guy. But
Jimmy Graham didn't have a bad year last year, man. When you think about it, it's stupid the year that he had.
Yeah, but he's one of them guys that's like DFS touchdown or bust. So you don't want to have him in your lineup. But Unfortunately, he's going to be around this year again, and Anthony Miller leaving just helps him out more than it helps Darnell Mooney. That people want to say. I had that little tweet about that.
That's
Mooney was
no
Mooney either
correlation.
way, but Mooney's going to be better even if Andy Dalton's starting, just because Andy Dalton can at least throw a deep ball better than Mitchell Trubisky. He did it last year with Michael Gallup.
Mm-hmm.
He probably would have done it even more with Michael Gallup if the line could have blocked it all. But, second and third string guys. So pretty much all we got left is if you got anything else you'd like to share before we get out of here.
Yeah, no, I just want to thank you for having me on again. It was a blast. I got to let loose a little with the verbiage, and it was fun, man. I love getting crazy like this. And really talking about, because I have such a prolonged history of Dynasty experience. No, it's nice because I can provide a perspective of someone who is still fresh to it. Yeah, I might have been researching it a little bit longer than I've been playing it, but I see the results of my process now, and I'm able to kind of analyze that and see where my process was right, where it was wrong, and how I can adjust going forward to really dial that in. So this has been kind of cool to really be self-reflective on that and talk about that today. So thank you for having me on for that. Plug wise, hit up the Smoke Show. I've just been plowing through the rebirth of this thing. I just got a message back. I'm going to be interviewing John Hansen in a couple hours here, so that's going to be great. I've been champing at the bit for this one, so that's going to be good. It's not going to be live streamed, so it'll be up sometime this week, I'm sure. But follow me on Twitter at TNFF_Smokey. That's SMOKEY for all your fantasy needs. And you can also follow the podcast at _smoke_show and at the Jets, or no, just at Jet Sweep Show. Yeah. We didn't throw the in there. I'll keep that shit small, kids.
Yep. Yeah.
And then, of course, any written content I do will only be on one place on the internet, and that will be TrueNorthFFB.com, home of the A team.
Yep. But once again, it was a pleasure having you on. I know we both kind of got into the industry at the same time producing content. So you've been around about a year. I've been around about a year as well. So definitely be sure to check out all your work over at the Smoke Show with all those interviews. Most recently, there was Mr. Joe Pisapia, which is one of probably the biggest names in the industry, Fantasy Black Book, probably one of the nicest guys you can ever meet.
He was great, man. It was such a just like me and you talking right now. It was just a laid back conversation about football. It was so much fun. It was so easy. I mean, you bring on the right guests and they just make everything so easy. You barely have to work.
Yeah, and I think he's somebody that, being newer in the industry, you can look up to. You've seen all the success that he's had, been all over the place too. It's part of it's knowing what it takes to get to that point, but and just seeing somebody that, and even, like my interaction that I've had with him, he's a very nice person too. So he's not one of those guys, you get way up there and he's big balloon head or something like that.
Nah, dude's genuine, down to earth. I can't say enough good things about Joe Pisapia, man. Love that guy.
Yep. But once again, this was a deeper dive into Dynasty with our special guest, Mr. Smokey. And obviously, if you haven't checked out the previous ones, go back and check them out as well. We had a pretty lengthy one with Dan Brown, but that was going more back in our it was a good one if you really get into it, but got a couple more planned. I've been rescheduling the one with Nate for about 4 times now. He started a new job, so it's kind of been a little hectic too. Then Mr. Julian Barnett, we got coming on as well.
Love Julian.
But we were aiming for last Thursday for that one, but then he got stuck at work for like a little bit of emergency. So we'll get that one rescheduled sometime here too. I got a couple other people, non-True North people that I'm bringing on as well, hopefully in the near future. So I think this is something that we're going to really keep going forward with. I'm going to be doing a little bit of a segment of deeper dive into DFS with some other DFS personalities. Still reaching out to a couple of them, but myself personally, I'm pretty big into DFS. I don't think you are quite as much though, but
don't ask me shit. I don't know shit. I'm terrible. I'm the worst person to ask about that. I will just point you in the right direction. That's about it.
Yeah. But That's going to be pretty interesting as well. Once again, if you guys are new to the channel, be sure to hit that little subscribe button down below. Got a lot of content that's going to be coming out this year very soon as well. So, if you're looking for content regarding fantasy football, NFL draft prospects, NBA, or NFL DFS, it's definitely going to be the place for you. And once again, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join both of us for this interview. It was definitely a pleasure for myself, and I look forward to, interacting with you more. If anybody has any comments, any questions down, be sure to leave them down below as well.